Good evening, everyone. Emory Moynagh here for In His Image. Well, the bad news just keeps coming. Article from the Federalist recently. This was published on January 10th. I'm recording it a couple of days later. Minnesota. The state of Minnesota. It is about to become full-blown Marxist. If you aren't homeschooling your kids and you live in Minnesota, you might want to consider it, like yesterday, because according to this article, and which has been recently based on recently approved changes to the state licensure, here a licensed teacher has been redefined, as it were. According to the Federalist article, quote, to be licensed in Minnesota starting in 2025, every teacher must not merely teach about, but personally advocate the core tenets of critical race theory and transgender ideology. Homeschool your kids. Now. It literally is that simple. Every teacher is going to be required to do this. Let me just read you a section from this, from the licensing board of the state of Minnesota. Listen to this. The teacher plans how to achieve each student's learning goals by choosing anti-racist, which by the way is racist. It's Marxist. Being an anti-racist is being a Marxist. Culturally relevant and responsive instructional strategies, accommodations, and resources to differentiate instruction for individuals and groups of learners. The teacher features, highlights, and uses resources written and developed by traditionally marginalized voices that offer diverse perspectives. By the way, diverse by the means Marxist. They don't actually want diversity. They want uniformity, Marxist uniformity, on race, culture, language, gender, sexual identity, ability, religion, nationality, migrant refugee status, socioeconomic status, read Marxism, housing status, read Marxism, and other identities traditionally silenced or omitted from curricula. So your child's teacher has to be a Marxist. And by the way, you have to have this license to be a teacher in Minnesota at all public schools and a lot of private and even Christian schools. You have to have this license. Homeschool your kids or leave Minnesota. The teacher creates opportunities for students to learn, practice, and use language of the content area. Read that as, this is an opportunity for the students to become anti-racists. That's how you should read that. Moving on. The teacher creates opportunities for students to learn about power, privilege, intersectionality. That's victimhood, by the way. It's how the ladder of victimhood and systemic oppression. Read white people are bad, everybody else is good. In the context of various communities, and empowers learners to be agents of social change to promote equity. By equity, they mean Marxism. Equity does not mean equality, folks. It means Marxism. It means everybody is equally miserable except the credentialed elites who get all the money, all the power, and all the prestige. That's what it means. By the way, do you want your kindergartners being agents of social change? Do you want your kid to be protesting outside the State House because some thug got killed by the cops because he tried to shoot the cops? Because this stuff's happened. Do you want your pre-K student to be taught about sexual identity and gender? Is that what you want for your kids? Is that what you want for your kids? Because that's coming to Minnesota. And by the way, this is not just an appeal to Christians. I know Minnesota's got an extensive Muslim population. Is that what you want, Somali immigrants? Do you want your children to be taught to be trans? Because that's what this is. That's what gender identity means. Do you want your children to be raised trans? Do you want your little boy to come home and tell you, Mommy, I'm a girl because my teacher told me so? Because that's what this is. They are turning the teachers in your child's public schools into Marxist agents of change. Continuing. The teacher fosters an environment that ensures student identities such as race, ethnicity, national origin, language, sex and gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, physical, developmental, emotional ability, socioeconomic class, there's the Marxist buzzword, remember what Marxism is, class struggle, and religious beliefs are historically and socially contextualized, affirmed, and incorporated into a learning environment where students are empowered to learn and contribute as their whole selves. Whole child, whole community. That's SEL. Folks, do you think for 1 second that either Christianity or Islam will be tolerated in an environment that has to affirm the gender identity and sexual orientation of students? Do you think that your little girl, when she comes home and says, "Mommy, I want to be a boy because teacher said I should be a boy," or "I like sports, so I want to be a boy because boys like sports," do you think that your religious beliefs as a parent will matter an iota to these Marxists? If you do, you're self-deluded. I can't help you. The teacher understands and supports students as they recognize and process dehumanizing biases, discrimination, prejudices, and structural inequities. Read struggle session. You know what that's going to mean, folks? That's going to mean they're going to struggle session your kids. And if you don't know what a struggle session is, go listen to James Lindsay's podcast on surviving a modern struggle session. I might link to it. A struggle session is where they convince you how racist, how wicked, how evil you are, and how you must change to support the state-endorsed ideology. That's where we are, folks. The state of Minnesota is going to make public school teachers be Marxists. If you're a Christian and you're teaching in Minnesota, in the Minnesota public school system, move. Because this isn't coming off the books. You got 2 years to find for an exit strategy, or you're going to have to sign your conscience away. If you're a Muslim and you're teaching in one of these schools, you got 2 years. Move, or find a new job. Or you're going to have to sign your conscience away. Now look, I believe Islam's a false religion. But I think Christians and Muslims can stand together on this. Right? We both don't want our little kids coming home with trans hormones that their teachers have affirmed them with. Okay? This is such a disaster, and it will destroy your kids. You know, there's an article on the Answers in Genesis website, which I think is a rather good article, that discusses the amount of time that children spend in public schools compared to how long they spend in religious establishments, in particularly churches. And this may be a little bit different in the Islamic community. But it's something like 3 or 4 to 1 that the school has them. And if your school's teachers are required to affirm this, they're going to be fighting you. They're not going to be working with you. They're going to be fighting you. All right? This is how woke the Minnesota public education system is. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks are not allowed to be discussed in social studies. Martin Luther King was pretty woke. He was also potentially a rapist and potentially a communist. But Martin Luther King, who's black, is not allowed to be discussed in social studies because he was not radical enough. This is how woke they are. Right? This is where Minnesota is. And by the way, this is where the rest of the public school system is going to go. if it's not there already. Homeschool your kids. Because this is insanity. And you know this is insanity. If you want your children to, as it says in Proverbs, be trained up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, then homeschool them. Get them out. Get them away from anyone who's got this license. Anyone who's got this license. Because they're dangerous. They're dangerous to your kids. If you don't care that your child goes through some of the horrible stuff that some of these detransitioners talk about going through, some of how difficult it is to just do basic bodily functions, and how they can't have kids. It's heartbreaking to talk about, and I can't even discuss some of the stuff that they've said. If you don't care about your kids going through that, then keep them in the Minnesota public schools. Keep them there. No problem. But if you care about your kids one iota at all, get them out. And if they aren't out, or probably if they aren't out already, they probably should be, but get them out now. Because I got news for you. This ruling's probably not getting turned over. We are facing the religion of a secular age. Ken Ham has called it the religion of sexual humanism. I would call it the religion of sexual Marxism. It's sexual Marxism, where they've combined the worst of the sexual revolution with social Marxism to destabilize, disrupt, and dismantle American society so that they can remake it by a revolution. And by the way, who usually is the foot soldiers in a revolution? It's the people who are discontent with society. And who is more discontent with society than the Rainbow Mafia? Which is what I call the LGBTQIA plus people. Which is mostly the T people at this point, because a lot of the gays are kind of getting tired of being called transphobic because they don't want to go hang and date somebody who's trans. Who is going to be more radical and be a better foot soldiers for the revolution than a bunch of mentally ill and sexually confused teenagers and young adults who have figured out they were lied to but haven't figured out how or why? This is sexual Marxism on full display in Minnesota. And by the way, other states will adopt this too. It will not take long. Now, I expect there'll probably be a legal challenge to this. I don't have a lot of hope in the courts, but it's possible this might get struck down. I doubt it. But then again, I was wrong about Roe. I didn't think the court would have the guts to strike that down. So it's conceivable that it may go, this may get struck down, but it's not likely. So you got 2 years. Make good use of that time. And if you're a parent, just remember, this all ties back to Darwinian evolution. This all ties back to the sexual revolution, both of which are glorified in your public schools. And don't forget that your child might have socially transitioned at school behind your back, and you might not even know about it. This happens all the time. It happened in Texas, for crying out loud, let alone in other states that are considered more liberal. Find out and get them out. I know it's more work. I know it's going to cost more money. I know it's going to be a pain. I get it. The question you have to ask yourself is, do you love your kids? And if the answer is yes, if you love them, then you love them more than your own inconvenience. Then you love them more than will outweigh the inconvenience that it's going to cause you to go and, take them out of public school and educate them yourself. Folks, we're living in a war, and your kids are the prize. Your kids are the prize that the enemy wants. You gonna fight for them? Or surrender? Minnesota's made the choice stark for you. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?